Here's the debt limit crisis in a nutshell. The Republican Party in Congress refuses to allow government borrowing, causing the government to run out of cash. Treasury Secretary Yellen has set June 1st as the time for potential default. The White House is negotiating with House Republicans, leaving the market in chaos, public opinions in all directions, and the general public baffled. There are three questions. Why is there a debt? Why a debt limit? Why a debt limit crisis? Government operations are similar to business and household finances in that they require borrowing for cash flow purposes. Think of car loans, mortgages, and credit cards, the terms of which all need approval. The Constitution stipulates that only Congress can authorize borrowing. When the government's income falls short of its expenditures, a budget deficit occurs, and borrowing is necessary. The borrowed money adds to the national debt. When Congress limits the government's borrowing, that limit is called a debt ceiling, similar to a credit limit. One way to look at it is, can the government use its income as collateral, like commercial loans? Currently, the debt limit is $31.4 trillion, approximately 99% of GDP net. Japan is at 168%, Italy 138%, and France 101%. Only the United States has a debt limit. When the opposition party controlling Congress refuses to allow the government to borrow, a debt limit crisis arises. The current debt limit crisis we are witnessing began on January 19, 2023, when the debt limit was reached, again, as it had happened several dozen times before. The Treasury Secretary implemented temporary measures to keep the government afloat. Wells Fargo forecast the federal government would likely default on its debt in early July, when Treasury would lack the funds to pay government bond yields and meet its obligations, triggering a global financial meltdown. The government would be forced to make significant budget cuts, and the economy would plummet by 5%, impacting everyone and every business. Moody's predicted a financial collapse in mid-August, but the crisis could be resolved before then. On May 1st, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen stated that all available special measures had been exhausted, and June 1st would be the big day. Ideally, the government's finances should be balanced, with sensible borrowing. What had led to the current situation? Was it inevitable? Or was it brought on intentionally, on purpose? What would possibly be that purpose? In the 21st century, the two major political parties, which have been in power twice each, have borrowed money and run deficits during their two terms. The 2022 fiscal year saw federal revenue at $4.9 trillion and expenditures at $6.27 trillion, resulting in a deficit of $1.38 trillion. Three things are worth noting. First, the federal budget deficit has not been inevitable. We will come back to this later. Second, historically, the debt limit has mostly been raised rather than lowered. Lastly, only the Republican Party has imposed limits on the Democratic Party. In other words, every debt limit crisis has a partisan fight started by one party. In the midterm elections of 2022, the Republican Party gained a razor-thin majority in the House of Representatives, which, though not enough for complete control, set the stage for a new debt limit face-off. A time bomb, and the clock began ticking. Republican Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy led the charge, while President Biden stood firm. McCarthy has demanded reducing federal spending before further borrowing. Biden wanted a clean raise in the debt limit first before sitting down to discuss balancing the budget, arguing that new borrowing is to pay for obligations previously approved by Congress, which simply must be paid. Biden demanded that the Republicans put forward a budget proposal for discussion. McCarthy refused. He couldn't get his party to reach a consensus and come up with a budget. Later, the Republican majority in the House of Representatives passed a bill, by one vote, outlining demands to cut expenditures, which the Democratic Party declined. The progressives refused to negotiate with hostage takers. Finally, Biden invited congressional leaders to the White House, initiating negotiations with House Republicans. He even cut short his scheduled Asia visit to return early to resolve the crisis. Last week, McCarthy changed his tone, saying that the House would vote to increase the debt limit this week. McCarthy again finds himself in a tight spot. He faces a one-vote veto, not from Biden but from a single vote in the House, any vote from any member of the House of Representatives. At the beginning of this Congress in early January, it took 15 rounds of voting for McCarthy to be elected as Speaker of the House, after he ultimately conceded to this one-vote agreement. The right-wing Republican members of the House, namely MAGA and the Freedom Caucus factions of the party, forced McCarthy to agree that any vote could motion for his removal as Speaker in order to secure their support for his election. The right wasted hardly any time to pick up another debt limit fight with Biden. From afar, Donald Trump called on the Republican Party to let the federal government default, letting an economic collapse. There seems no room for compromise, as Marjorie Taylor Greene, MAGA superstar House member, openly advocates for a national divorce to split the country. Yet McCarthy is generally considered a moderate, and the mainstream Republican Party is neither willing to split nor dare to wreck the economy. What enmity and resentment runs so deep that a self-destructive hostage-taking tactic must be used? What turned the debt limit, which was never a problem until recently, into a chronic crisis that refuses to go away? Why hasn't it been resolved? Can there be a solution? For how long? We'll finish off next time. What do you think? Share your thought or comment. Please subscribe if you like it. Thanks for watching and listening. See you next time.